If I shared my screen. All right, guys, thanks for joining us this morning. We're going to be talking about differential reinforcement, and these are consequence strategies mainly. So these are strategies that we're going to implement after we see displays of behavior. And we're going to talk about different types of differential reinforcement. We're going to talk about what differential reinforcement is. And I think we're going to talk about effective reinforcement strategies and ideas to think about when we're working with our VIP. So let's get right into it. So we're going to first teach you about ways to promote learning by living a healthy lifestyle. We're going to teach different types of consequences, and then we're going to talk about types of differential reinforcement. So let's do it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is brain-derived neurotropic factor, guys. And what does this mean? It's short, it sounds complicated. We could say BDNF for short. Well, it's just a protein that plays a crucial role in the brain, particularly in neuronic survival, growth, and plasticity. So what does that mean? It means this protein is very good for our brain. It helps to repair our brain, it helps to grow our brain, and it helps our brain survive essentially. It's essential for learning, memory, and various brain functions. Um, and what does it mean for increases brain plasticity? Well, when your brain cells die or get damaged or face stressful situations, BDNF protects them and helps them come back stronger. So in our work, teaching people, helping them learn, helping them grow, living a healthy lifestyle and increasing their BDNF is a great way to promote learning and promote those connections in the brain that we would like to make. So there's certain ways that we can increase BDNF, and essentially these things are just living a healthy lifestyle, whether it's exercise, these enriched environments, having a really pleasant environment, sunlight, being social, maybe attending our social club that's going on tonight, deep sleep, meditation, a low carb diet, and managing stress. And there's also food, drug, and supplements like turmeric, dark chocolate, and fatty fish, and many more that would help increase BDNF. So when we're thinking about BDNF, just remember that a lot of these things, and there's many more things that increase BDNF. But essentially, like I said, most of them are living a healthy lifestyle, getting enough sleep at night, reaching that REM sleep, eating right, being social, hanging out with your friends. All of these things can promote BDNF. So how do we use this in clinical practice? Well, I like to recognize where in my VIP's life that they might benefit from changing some of their lifestyle choices. And I really try to identify goals that would promote increasing BDNF by living a healthy lifestyle. So, for instance, I might work with a VIP who doesn't regularly exercise. Well, maybe I start to make that part of my treatment packages that I'm going to take them out for a walk on nice days, and maybe have our session in the community walking around getting some exercise in. So I'm just recognizing kind of where my VIP might benefit from some lifestyle changes, and I'm encouraging them to make a choice and pick something that they might want to work towards to live a healthy life. And on the back end, I know that's going to increase BDNF and help with the rest of the skills I'm teaching and help make them feel better and help them have a healthy brain as well. So that's what BDNF is all about. And if we could help our VIPs have increased BDNF, it's only going to help with this learning that we're trying to do, help with our teaching. Does anyone have any questions or anything to add about BDNF? Okay. So now we're going to talk about effective reinforcement. And when we say effective reinforcement, we just mean we can manipulate the way we deliver reinforcement or our consequence strategies to make them super effective. We can think about some of these ideas and implement them and make what we're doing much more effective. So we have this high BDNF going on, but we could also discover ways to deliver this effective reinforcement. And the first one's immediate. So reinforcement that's delayed or delivered at a later time is much less effective than reinforcement that's delivered immediately. And when I say immediately, I can mean even during or immediately after the behavior that we'd like to see. And if you recognize, and that's why we're ABC data collecting on problem behaviors is so important to collect, because in what is happening right after the behavior many times is what is maintaining a behavior into the future. So really something that we need to pay close attention to. Distinct. So making sure the VIP is aware when a positive praise statement or other types of reinforcement is delivered, making sure that you have their attention and that you can provide that reinforcement and they are aware of it. Descriptive. So many times I might hear people say, good job, nice work, and kind of use those types of positive praise statements for reinforcement. But we want to be descriptive. We want to say exactly what we enjoyed about the behavior. Hey, nice job washing your hands. Nice job using soap. Great job interacting with Betty. That was a great conversation you guys had. So I'm really trying to point out exactly what behaviors that I'd like to see in the future, what behaviors I like to reinforce. So taking it just a step further than just saying nice job or good work is being descriptive about when we use our positive praise statements. Making sure that we know what the VIP prefers. Because if you think about it, if we're back kind of thinking about attention, not everyone likes the same types of attention, right? Sometimes people would like a small fist bump. Other times people like someone that's really goofy or outgoing and that kind of attention. So really knowing what our VIP prefers, what we could kind of use then for reinforcement then potentially if we know kind of what they prefer. So that's getting to know your VIP, hanging out with them, seeing what kind of interactions that they like, and we could replicate those interactions with our positive praise statements or other types of reinforcers. Varied is another important consideration for effective reinforcement, that people don't like to receive the same reinforcement over and over and over again throughout the day. And actually, what happens is as our brain is contacting a certain type of reinforcement, it starts lowering the value of it as we start to be exposed to it. And we see this, at a buffet, right? When you get to the buffet and you're super hungry and you're eating food, as you kind of are eating and becoming satiated, there's less of a desire to go up and get more and more food until we are full. And if you think about it, this varied and all of these strategies really ensured our survival as ancient people, that we didn't eat ourselves to death or drink ourselves to death, that over time, as we contact these reinforcements, they lose their luster, they lose their reinforcing qualities momentarily. So we want to make sure that we understand that when delivering positive praise statements, that we are delivering so we're not just saying good job, brushing your teeth, good job washing your hands, good job, and we're not using the same reinforcement over and over, because that's really going to stifle what we're trying to do. So making sure we vary our reinforcement is super important. And then certain, so especially when we're teaching new behaviors, delivering reinforcement for every occurrence of that behavior is a great way to maintain a new behavior in one of our VIPs and even in our own life. So making sure that reinforcement is delivered for every instance of the behavior as we're teaching a new skill. So if we can understand these six ways to deliver effective reinforcement, we're making our job that much easier. And these ideas we could teach to family members, to staff members, and other stakeholders that are involved to really ensure that they are delivering effective reinforcement. And also, when we're working with VIPs trying to uncover the function of a problem behavior, these are some ideas about what might be maintaining a problem behavior too. If we could consider these and know the consequences for problem behaviors, we know that if a consequence following a problem behavior has these type of qualities, it's going to be super effective. Does anyone have any questions or anything to add about ways we could deliver effective reinforcement? Okay. We're going to get into types of consequences now. So these are just what's going to happen after behavior. And guys, remember, consequences are what maintain behaviors into the future, and that's what reinforcement means. So there's types of consequences or different consequences that could be delivered for behavior. And the first one, like we mentioned a lot, is reinforcement. And what do we mean by reinforcement?
Increase the chances of the behavior occurring again in the future.
Yeah, so it's a stimuli that happens immediately after behavior or during behavior that has an effect on the behavior that it causes it to become more likely to happen again in the future. So that's what reinforcement means. Many times people coming into the field, they have a wide array of different definitions for reinforcement. But what reinforcement is just a stimuli that happens after behavior that causes that behavior to occur again more likely in the future. So, and you might hear the word maintain. And what we mean is that behavior is becoming reinforced. We see it again and again and again. So when we get called in for a problem behavior and we see this and we're collecting data, we're doing our FBA and collecting data, and we see a behavior occurring again and again and again, and we have a similar consequence that's occurring after the behavior, we can say with certainty that that type of consequence has that reinforcing effect on our VIP. And another consideration to make here, guys, is that not everything that's reinforcing to me will be reinforcing to you or our VIPs. So we can't come in with our preconceived ideas that our VIPs like me jumping up and down, celebrating and giving them a high five. They may not find that type of interaction reinforcing. And ultimately, we don't know whether something is reinforcing or not until we graph it, until we see that behavior maintain. So really, as we discover our VIP's preferences, they're more likely to be reinforcers, but not always. And guys, I really want to hit home too that I don't have to prefer a consequence for it to be reinforcing. Okay, so it's not about what I prefer or not prefer, and everyone is different. So we really have to get to know our VIPs and we really have to collect that ABC data. Does anyone have any questions about reinforcement or anything to add about it? Any questions? Okay. So the next type of consequences is extinction, and you guys might have heard this term as well in ABA. And what we mean by extinction is just that reinforcement is withheld. So instead of we see a behavior occur, and instead of the reinforcement being delivered, the reinforcement's withheld. And there's different things that we have to consider about using extinction, and I don't recommend to use it with people who could be aggressive because we could see a spike in behavior if we decide to go this route. And I want to really encourage you guys to never use extinction or any strategy without discussing it with the BCBA first. But extinction just simply means that we are withholding reinforcement for a previously reinforced behavior. Can someone give me an example of that?
Let's say there's an example that somebody's calling out in class, and usually that results in a teacher immediately tending to their needs and say, "Oh, Billy, do you have a question?" And then instead of answering to Billy, maybe they're not going to answer to Billy and prompt him to raise his hand.
Yeah, a great example. So we saw that kind of that learning history where the teacher's providing that attention and someone's going to come in and not provide attention for that behavior again in the future. So it's effectively that behavior will start to be reduced in frequency. So that's what extinction is all about. There's another example I like to think about where we had an OCD type behavior of someone flipping on and off a light switch. And we determine that they enjoy the light, the sensory and the light that comes on and off. So what do you think is a way to put that behavior on extinction?
You twist out the light bulb.
Yeah, take the light bulb out. Exactly. So now we're kind of removing that consequence. So we're withholding that reinforcement. So that's a way that we can use extinction. But again, we have to make sure that it is recommended by a BCBA. And then finally, a punishment. And this just simply means that the behavior is becoming reduced. It doesn't mean we're doing anything mean or nasty to our VIPs. You know, those are kind of adversive consequences, which we would never use and never implement with in our work with VIPs. But what we mean here by punishment is the behavior instead of maintaining or increasing on a graph that is slowly going down or slowly being reduced. And that is kind of the opposite of reinforcement. And again, we don't mean anything bad or negative when we use the word punishment in this case. We just mean that the behavior is becoming reduced over time. So the opposite of reinforcement. And again, we do not use any kind of adversive consequences to change behaviors. We strictly, 99% of the time, use reinforcement to treat behaviors. And sometimes we will use extinction as well, but only approved by a BCBA. Does anyone have any questions about the type of consequences? Okay. So now we're going to get into differential reinforcement. And these are kind of the strategies that we're going to be using to help our VIPs. It's a consequence strategy that we mentioned. So these strategies are focused after behavior occurs. We're going to do our best to reinforce appropriate replacement behaviors while minimizing reinforcement for challenging behaviors. And we're going to consider this thing called the matching law at the very end. So let's talk about it. Okay, so these are the types of differential reinforcement. We're going to talk about it. So the first one is differential reinforcement of other behaviors. And we simply call this one the DRO. And the differential reinforcement of other behaviors is reinforced for the absence of problem behaviors for a specified time period. The time period will reset if behaviors occur during that interval. And we must use this strategy with other differential reinforcement strategies. This is kind of the first differential reinforcement strategy that was used, and it wasn't typically used in ABA. ABA is a relatively new science. This was used prior to ABA, and it was used in prison systems that I've learned, and other kind of institutions like that, where they kind of told the inmates and they said, "Hey, if you don't get in a fight with your cellmate, we're going to give you money at the commissary. Hey, if you don't join a gang in here, we're going to let you out in the yard for a longer period of time or something like that." So they are essentially saying, don't engage in a certain behavior, and we will deliver a reinforcement for that. I was working in a group home in my early career, and one of the VIPs there, he was on a DRO procedure. I didn't realize at the time, but we would give him $1 a day if he didn't elope from the house, if he didn't leave the house. So they were using this DRO procedure, and I was kind of first introduced to it. What do you think the problem is with this DRO? Why do you think we need to make sure we use other differential reinforcement strategies while we're using the DRO? What's the problem with it, do you think?
Wouldn't the VIP then get dependent on that reinforcer? For instance, like the dollar a day thing.
Yeah, I mean,
And they
yes,
come to
they could.
expect that. So when you extinct that, they begin to that behavior then resurfaces or comes back.
It could, yes, that's definitely a good point. That could happen, but not the idea I was thinking about for this one. But good point, Chris. Appreciate it. What
Is
other?
it? It doesn't. I'm sorry. I was gonna say it doesn't really lead to like you're not teaching a specific replacement behavior. It could lead to the reinforcement of other behaviors or undesirable things.
Yeah, so like we're delivering reinforcement for not joining a gang or my VIP not eloping. But what if we're giving him that dollar right before he um engaged in property destruction behavior, right? So essentially, we're reinforcing other behaviors, and they're not other behaviors that we may like to see. And the other problem is that we're not reinforcing a behavior that would lead this person to the need of the problem behavior. So we're not teaching this alternative. We're not teaching this replacement skill. We're just simply reinforcing the absence of behavior. And when we reinforce the absence of behavior, we're essentially reinforcing other behaviors that are occurring at that time, right? There's no way to reinforce the absence of a behavior. If you think about it, it doesn't even make sense. We need, if we remember from our other trainings, we need behavior to involve action and interaction with the environment. So not engaging in a behavior is not a behavior. So what essentially are we doing with this strategy? We're reinforcing other behaviors that are occurring at the time reinforcement is being delivered. So this strategy, and I don't want to discount this strategy because it is a useful strategy, but we want to make sure we use it with other differential reinforcement strategies that we'll get into in a moment. Does anyone have any questions about the DRO? So you might see this when you go out. You might see parents or stakeholders or people engaged in this kind of strategy right off the bat. They've kind of learned about it. It's kind of like a common sense kind of strategy that someone would come up with no knowledge of ABA. But take it that next, recognize that that's not good enough and take it one step further. Encourage these stakeholders to kind of shape up this plan by adding another differential reinforcement strategy that we'll get into. So differential reinforcement of incompatible behaviors, and we call this one the DRI. So we're going to reinforce the desired behavior that makes the challenging behavior impossible to occur. And I like to change out incompatible for impossible as well when I think about the DRI. We're going to select the desired behavior that's in the VIP skill repertoire. And you'll notice that's a common theme that the alternative behaviors we're teaching must be able to be done by our VIP. So we have an example here of picking skin, and we reinforce using a fidget spinner. So obviously when our VIP uses a fidget spinner, it makes the picking skin behavior impossible to complete. Another example here is I had a VIP in the school system that would touch other students when we were transitioning. So I created a big hall pass and I encouraged the student to carry that hall pass while transitioning, and we reduced that behavior. We had a VIP that was pulling things off the shelves in stores, and the common approach was we can't take them to stores anymore. So what we did is we just brought the iPad with them when we're in these high risk environments. We encourage them to use the iPad, encourage them to keep their hands occupied as a way to make the problem behaviors impossible to complete. Does anyone have any other ideas about the DRI? Another idea might be putting your hands in your pockets, encouraging the VIP to put their hands in their pockets to prevent other kind of maybe picking behaviors or something like that. So the DRI is just a strategy we would use to make the problem behavior impossible to complete. And again, we want to make sure that the behavior we're trying to teach is in the VIP skill repertoire. DRI. Okay, we're gonna skip over this one. So here we go. And this is our golden goose, guys. This is what we always want to strive for when we're working on a problem behavior is differential reinforcement of alternative behavior or the DRA. And like I said, we could use the DRO with the DRI. We could use the DRO with the DRA as well. So this DRA though is what we always want to go with. We always want to default to this if possible. So we're gonna have two behaviors. We're gonna have the problem behavior and the alternative behavior, and we're gonna heavily reinforce the desired behavior or the alternative behavior, and we're gonna minimize reinforcement for the challenging behavior. We have to make sure that the behavior that we're teaching leads to the same function or result as the challenging behavior. So that's why it's so important to determine the function behind problem behaviors, because we want to teach an alternative that would lead the person to the same consequence. And I would even argue a better consequence that's similar than the problem behavior. We also want to consider that behavior must be less effortful than the challenging behavior. And also we want to make sure that this alternative behaviors is in the VIP skill repertoire. Okay, so when we're teaching this DRA, we want to make sure that it's less effortful than the challenging behavior. And if you think about challenging behaviors, many times these are very effortful behaviors. We have high emotions, we have a lot of effort going into the problem behavior many times. So I want to teach a behavior that's less effortful for the person. And that's why it's important we consider the VIP skill repertoire because I want to choose an alternative that's easily accomplished by our VIP. So what could be a great strategy here to teach an alternative for someone that might be aggressive to obtain candy?
Make an easier pathway to obtain the candy.
That's right. But how? What would we teach? What could we teach?
You could do a little FCT, kind of get them to man for what they want instead of, going right to that.
Yeah, so we're going to teach that functional communication response, and we're going to teach the person to request candy by using some kind of communication, and it'll lead them to a lot of great candy, right? That's the idea here. And hopefully, this request that we're teaching them is a lot less effortful than the problem behavior, and we're going to lead that to reinforcement. Okay. And we're going to minimize reinforcement for the challenging behaviors because we're going to consider this person's aggressive and and they're an adult. We may want to steer clear of using extinction strategies because that tends to make things worse in the here and now. So we want to make sure we just minimize reinforcement for the challenging behaviors and maximize reinforcement for the alternative behaviors we're going to teach. Does anyone have any questions about this? The DRA. Oh, and then we're going to consider the matching law. So what is the matching law, you might ask? Well, relative response rates will match relative reinforcement rates. So example here is when someone spends more time watching TV than exercising, even if they know exercising is healthier. So obviously the TV is just more reinforcing to this person. So when we're thinking about doing the DRA or any of these differential reinforcement strategies, it's how do I increase the level of reinforcement for the alternative behavior I'm trying to teach? And there's many creative ways to do that depending on what kind of reinforcement we're working on. I remember Andy was working on someone that was, I always think of this when I'm thinking about matching law, about someone who was engaging in problem behaviors to gain access to a drink. Okay, we don't want to withhold drinks from anyone. We're not in that kind of business. So instead, when they engaged in problem behaviors, we gave them a drink from the water fountain. It's good, it's fine. But when they requested it appropriately, Andy made sure he had ice frozen. He made sure that he had a nice cup that changed colors and really increasing that consequence or that level of enjoyment for that reinforcer for the alternative behavior we're teaching. So that was, I just thought, a very clever idea to increase that level of reinforcement for that alternative behavior, like I said. Does anyone have any other examples? What about like the candy example? What could we manipulate with the candy when the person uses appropriate communication to request it?
Give
You might
two
be able to
pieces
give
of
them.
candy.
Yeah, there you go.
Give more pieces of candy? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Or a more preferred
Yeah, like
type of
better
candy.
candy.
Yeah, or the best candy that they enjoy. That's a great idea as well that we're gonna and maybe do both. They're gonna get more and um they're also going to get their preferred, And think about matching log, guys. If I put two buttons in front of you that you couldn't push at the same time, and this is the way it was described to me, it just made so much sense to simplify this. And I had two buttons in front of you, and the one button led to $1 and the other button led to $100. And like I said, they're across the room. You can't press them at the same time. What button are you going to be smashing?
The one
The
The
nearest.
100.
The 100, right? Makes sense.
Yes.
So think about that. Problem behavior is we're going to be giving that $1. That's the dollar button is the problem behavior, right? The alternative behavior we're going to teach is that $100 button. And that's how we want to think about setting up our behavior support plans and our treatment. That when the VIP engages in that alternative behavior, they're going to win that jackpot. And someone said that to me. I love that. I just love that jackpot idea that the person's going to win the jackpot, that they're going to get the best form of reinforcement for that alternative behavior. And guys, essentially what we're doing is we're rewiring the brain to practice a new behavior, and our brain likes to receive the most bang for its buck. So if we can engage in a behavior and receive a ton of reinforcement or a ton of stuff that we like that's highly preferred, we are much more likely to do those behaviors in the future rather than hit that button for $1. We're going to keep hitting that button for $100. So that's the idea behind matching law and how to set up your treatment and to think about alternative behaviors and how we can manipulate the consequence to make sure that behaviors maintain in a person's life. And I believe that's the last slide for us, guys. Does anyone have any questions about anything we reviewed today or anything to add?
Mike, I have a good example for the
Please.
matching law. Um, with our one guy, he curses a lot of, inappropriate things he says. Give him real like cheap attention, But when he talks about like, appropriate things, I'm giving him that rich, dense attention, paying every word that he's saying. So like that's just an example I thought of.
Yeah, great example using
Good
like
example, man.
attention. Yeah, minimizing attention for the problem behavior and maximizing it for the alternative behavior we're trying to teach. Anything else, guys? All right, guys. Well, I really appreciate you joining us this morning. If you have anything for me, do not hesitate to reach out on Teams. I'd be happy to answer any questions ongoingly. This video will be posted to YouTube too, so you could reference it later. And I hope it's super effective in your work working with our VIPs. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much, Mike.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a
Thank
good day,
you.
everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You too. Have a great day.